it's such a simple message. Just eat real food, eat single ingredient foods, eat meat, eat plants, eat foods with a label that your grandmother would recognize every ingredient. And I think most chronic illness would get better. And it's so heartbreaking to me to imagine people who continue to suffer, who want to get better, who never find the information. The quality of the food you eat is everything. Yeah. Over the last even 20 years, large processed food companies are actively funding organizations that are obviously built to confuse people. In 2015, the New York Times broke a story about the Global Energy Balance Network, calories in, calories out. It's secretly funded by Coca-Cola.
Hi, everyone. Today's guest is one that I'm really extremely excited about. Not just because he's got, more energy than just about anyone I know, which says a lot, but because he has taken risks in his career to explore new ideas, to discover new diets, and advocate for a healthy future. He's even carved out a reputation for himself as a devoted carnivore with his animal-based diet. And I can't wait for you to meet him. He's a double certified MD, a health influencer, and a fearless force in the wellness world. And something on a personal note, one of the things I most admire about him is that he was willing to change his mind and pivot publicly. Please meet and welcome to the show, Paul Saladino. This podcast is brought to you by Troscriptions. Troscriptions has created science-backed, pharmaceutical-grade, physician-designed, and rigorously tested formulas delivered in a completely novel way to help you address things like energy, more focus, more sleep, less anxiety, and better immune system function. Troscription uses this innovative delivery system. So the Boucle troche, which is a small, very small dissolvable lozenge that is placed between the upper cheek and the gum. So it's very easy to use. Sometimes, I'll be honest, I just drink it and eat it, but usually I put it in my mouth. They're extremely fast acting because they infuse their ingredients directly into the cheek mucosa. Troscription sources high quality ingredients globally. It subjects them to, rigorous testing to ensure unparalleled purity and potency. Super important. Each troche is meticulously calibrated and scored, allowing users to easily adjust or titrate their dosage to meet their individual needs. All Troscription products are crafted in the US, adhering to strict quality standards to ensure superior efficacy and safety. So they've really thought about it all. They have the blue canatine. It gives you a little bit of focus and productivity. The Just Blue, it decreases inflammation and improves cellular health and energy. They have TroCalm. I love this one. Promotes relaxation and stress relief. So if you're really curious, they have a completely new way to optimize your health. Give it a try at troscriptions.com/Gabby, troscriptions.com/Gabby, or enter Gabby at checkout, Gabby, and you will get 10% off your first order. That's troscriptions.com/Gabby for 10% off your first order. Paul Saladino, welcome to the show. First of all, welcome to my house. I was like, oh, you have a son or, 5-year-old? You're like, no. And I'm like, oh, you're married? No. I was like, oh, okay. Well, the internet has got it wrong, but you do have love. Congratulations.
Yeah, I'm super excited about it.
And I will be interested when your child, when you decide to have one, then we can talk about getting, kids to eat well, because we all go through it as parents.
I'm excited to experiment with that because I have ideas about how to do it, but I don't have my own children.
What are your ideas?
Well, I have a niece and a nephew.
Okay.
Right? So I have a 5-year-old nephew and a 7-year-old niece. I have one younger sister. Mm-hmm. She's 8 years younger than me. And she, I think, has done a good job, but it's hard when I'm with the kids because every once in a while she'll feed them bread or something that I would prefer not to feed my future children. And I don't know. I mean, this is going to sound silly telling you this. You're a parent, right? You've already raised children.
That's okay.
But I think that when I have children, I want to have conversations with them about why I make the decisions I do with my food and what decisions I hope they will make with food. And when they are able to have this ability to self-reflect, I want to give them the freedom to choose foods that they want, but then to have the responsibility to then self-reflect to me about how they feel with those foods. And I want to give them the story of how I think those foods affect their life, right? So this is what I do in my work is how do the foods we eat affect our lives and affect other people's lives? And I think I got interested in all of this because I saw my father unhealthy and he's a doctor. I eventually went to medical school, but when I was younger, I just was so interested in why people became unhealthy. And I want to tell my kids that same story, and as accurately and as honestly and as genuinely as I can tell it, to say, if we eat these foods, I believe, and I think that their mom will believe this too, that this affects the trajectory of your life. You know, it's not just about I'm eating this food to have enough calories to go play soccer or baseball or swim or surf. It's if I make better food choices, my life will be completely different.
And they will.
Yeah,
they will.
That's my hope. It's my hope.
Because my thing is, and I know you've experienced this a lot, is there's so many people who work so hard and they're running around in life and they're doing the best they can and they're, you know, working and dealing with family and all these things. And they think being tired or being gassy or, you know, feeling a little bit sad, like they don't even know that there's another way. So really, if you can just start out your kids with this idea of there is a way, and you sort of feel good and, oh, I've been sleeping good, they'll have just a baseline to deal with.
I mean, I think about the way that I eat, and I think that my mind is unique in that I'm fairly rigid. And so some people will say, I don't have the discipline to eat well, but my mind is like the reverse. Like, I don't have the discipline to not eat well. I just have such a negative psychological impact when I don't eat well and I feel badly that for me, it's not hard to eat well. But I think for a lot of people, if I look at their diets, I think, wow, where are they getting their nutrients? You know, or I think back to when I was a child, before maybe the last 15 years of my life, the diet has been more intentional than it was in the first 25 years of my life, or 35 years of my life. And I think, you know, they're eating Pop-Tarts for breakfast and then cereal. And I think, like, where are you getting your micronutrients? Where are you getting any real deep nutrients that fuel human cognition, energy, recovery, sleep? And I think most people are probably living in such a fog that they don't understand what it's like to feel good. And they have no concept of signal versus noise. They don't know what makes them feel better or worse, because all of the food just kind of puts them in this hazy, gray, foggy area of, like, I sort of have bloating, I sort of have gas, I don't sleep well, I'm kind of irritable now, and my mood is all over the place. I can't really think that clearly.
And my other hope with that is that sometimes we are in a hacking world and everyone's looking for a device to also tell them how they're feeling. My other hope is that, to your point, that we also go back to our internal wisdom and be able to still sense things for ourselves, because I do feel like we like to turn it over sometimes.
I agree.
To technology. And then really the ultimate would be, and this is in your message, how are you fine tuning and turning the levers for what's best for who you are and your physiology and where you are at what time in your life, and not, you know, looking for the outside world or device to say, oh, you know what, today's a good day to train hard. You know, so that's my other hope is not only to know the difference, but then to know the difference truly for yourself, especially as we're merging, so it appears, with technology.
Yeah, I really don't use much technology in my life for the feedback stuff. I got an Oura Ring recently. I have no affiliation with them. And I used it for a few days a week, and I haven't even used it since. I don't want, I can tell when I wake up, you know, within the first 30 to 45 minutes of waking up, I'm like, oh, okay, that was good. Pretty much I can tell as I'm sleeping throughout the night, how I did. I know when I went to sleep. I know how I feel quickly within the day. I don't really need the Oura Ring to give me a score. Yeah. I think it's helpful for some people to get the feedback and they say, oh, I'm like 76 last night. What did I do wrong? Oh, I had a glass of wine with dinner, or I ate too late. But yeah, I think that there's a lot of feedback that we can just get from our body. It's so intuitive. Yeah. A lot of people in our culture I've been thinking about this a lot recently, energy drinks and things like this to kind of override those signals, right? Like, I was thinking about this the other day. I don't know what I was researching, like the best-selling energy drinks and how they were trending differently, because we did some content on Celsius. And I was just thinking, like, I see a lot of Celsius ads. Is Celsius like a big selling energy drink? I think their sales last year were 1.5 billion, give or take. I think Red Bull does 7.5 billion. Oh, and I think the second one is around 5 billion for Monster.
Yeah.
But Celsius has gone up a lot. And I think if you look at all the energy drinks, the total sales are probably close to $20 billion a year. This is just probably domestically in the United States for energy drinks. And you think, like that's not really nutritious. It has some nutrients in it. And there's an interesting story about which nutrients are in energy drinks, but that's $15 to $20 billion of income, of revenue going to people probably who are not rested enough, not recovered enough, not nutrient replete enough to actually be doing the exercise they're trying to do. And they're just, we use the energy drinks to just kind of override all the fatigue, all the brain fog that we're experiencing, instead of actually just experiencing those things and thinking, why do I feel so bad?
Yeah.
Do I need to work on my sleep? Do I need to improve my diet? Am I drinking too much coffee too late in the day? Like, it's just, we're using these crutches and this huge crutch, this energy drink, ethos now, this $20 billion a year revenue crutch to just say, no, I don't care what I'm feeling. I'm going to slam this monster and I'm going to get so jacked up that I'm going to go to the gym. And in some warped world, we're thinking that's health or that's better for you. That's just like, wow, we are really crushing our physiology and our adrenals. But if we really got back to this intuition that you're talking about, most of us might think like, wow, I just don't feel good enough.
It's interesting. I was joking with you earlier about kids, but I've never been a particularly great sleeper. And then once you start having children, you can get kind of thrown off your rhythms because it's just a different situation. And then they're teenagers and they're out. So you're sort of asleep, but you're not really until they get home. So it's 1 o'clock, it's 2 o'clock, right? It's very interesting how you go through these phases, and you have to find ways to dance in it. So if you had too many artificial things propping you up, I think it would make it harder, because there's days I wake up and I'm right in touch with how I'm feeling. And it's like, hey, I'm going to train today, but I'm going to be a little more careful or whatever. But, and getting ready to talk with you, and I have obviously, looked at your work over the years for a lot of times. The first thing that came to my mind was, okay, so you stated earlier, you went to medical practice, you had your own health issues, you sort of landed on the carnivore because you hear Jordan Peterson talking, and talking about how this really helped him. And so you leaned hard into, you became the Carnivore MD. People have seen you that way. There's a couple things that I thought about getting ready. One was you've shown some type of flexibility, because publicly you sort of really picked a lane. And what's interesting, and what I want to ask you first about, is when you pick a lane that then now your business, and let's call it identity, wraps into it. It has penetration, it works. And then in a way you're kind of feeling like maybe you get stuck there, right? So first of all, what was that like for you to go, you know what, I'm gonna take all my chips, I'm gonna go all in on this. And because people either love it or hate it. And it works. That's why it works. So what was that like for you? And what was there sort of an epiphany, or it just happened gradually?
So when I was in residency at the University of Washington after medical school, I had some really bad eczema flares. And I'd had eczema throughout my life, but these were really bad. It was like full chest, elbows, wrist, almost like autoeczematous reaction. We call it an id reaction in Western medicine. And you're absolutely right. I heard Jordan Peterson on Joe Rogan's podcast. I was thinking holistically in terms of how I wanted to build my medical practice in the future. I was really interested at the time in terms of what causes disease. Like, that's fascinating to me. And I've always had this sense that it was more simple than Western medicine makes it out to be. Because as a doctor, so I'd been through medical school, I have an MD, I'm in my postgraduate training. So I'd been in medicine for years at this point. And what you see is just this narrative that it's incredibly complex, and we have all these new medications, and there's hundreds of millions of dollars going into cancer research, and we don't even know what's causing these things. It's so complicated. And all of that, I always kind of felt like, yeah, I don't think so, right? I think it's much simpler than we're being told it is, but there's this narrative that kind of props up this pharmaceutical model. It's so complicated. Thank God we have these elegant pharmaceuticals, gifts from the gods, and we're going to figure this out. And I'm thinking like, but nobody's doing research about nutrition, and nobody's actually really trying to do research aimed at the root cause. All the research just seems to be sort of about how we treat the illness. So in the back of my mind, when Jordan Peterson is on Joe Rogan's podcast talking about his sleep apnea, his rheumatoid arthritic condition, which I think in his family is sort of undiagnosed, but sounds like rheumatoid arthritis or juvenile rheumatoid arthritis. And he says, I went carnivore and it all got better. I just thought, that's incredible. Like, you mean that a dietary change and it's a very intentional elimination diet, all you ate was meat and your autoimmune condition got better. And I think what he was suggesting and what people in the carnivore space, even before me, were suggesting was that maybe for some people with autoimmune conditions, not all plants are healthy. And I thought, that's radical. I have eczema, let me try. And so that was the huge sort of leap that I took. And my personality is just that if I do something, I'm going to do it, right? I've always been super intense. I'm like, yes, I'm going to do this. And I did it for a year and a half. And in the beginning, it was great. My eczema goes away within a few weeks, doesn't come back. I feel pretty good in the gym. And as I'm sort of like gaining some notoriety in the field, people are sharing their stories with me. And you hear these stories about people, inflammatory bowel diseases, Crohn's, ulcerative colitis, other people with eczema and psoriasis finding improvements. And you think, there's something here. There is a kernel of truth here that breeds a lot of passion and enthusiasm for me. And I think like, this is amazing. I want to write a book about this. And so it's like, I'm writing the book, which was a whole experience in itself. I never thought I could write a book, but somehow I actually kind of liked the writing process. And it was basically like, as I was publishing the book, I began to have more and more suddenly sort of side effect symptoms associated with probably long-term keto. I had heart palpitations that would wake me up from sleep. So I would be sleeping and just awaken to what was probably supraventricular tachycardia. I would have muscle cramps when I was surfing or climbing, like indoor climbing. You do a lot of like pointing with your calf muscle. My calf would cramp. I had muscle cramping so bad at points on the ketogenic journey with pure carnivore that I could flex my forearm like this and it would cramp. Like that's very interesting to get cramps in your upper extremities, right?
What is that a lack of, you think?
It's electrolytes. So what's interesting about carnivore, when you go fully zero carb or like very, very low carb, you don't really get much of an insulin spike at all, which can be good for some people maybe who have insulin resistance, but insulin is also very valuable. Insulin gets a bad rap. It's this peptide hormone produced by the beta cells of your pancreas. And it's thought to be a bad thing. And it's essential for human life. Obviously, if you have a type 1 diabetic, their pancreas has been attacked by their own immune system. They don't make insulin. They will die without this peptide hormone. You have to give themselves insulin. And it's not that you don't make insulin when you're only eating meat. You do secrete some insulin after you eat, but the levels are consistently so low that you realize, oh, wait, like actually having insulin in your bloodstream is valuable for humans in a cyclic fashion throughout the day after you eat food with carbohydrates in it, whether it's a squash or honey or fruit or whatever. Because that insulin, I was never taught this in medical school, but that insulin actually acts at the level of your kidneys to help resorb many of the electrolytes going out in the urine. These are things like potassium, sodium, and then the magnesium or other electrolytes that follow with those. So in the kidneys, there's this really elegant, complex system of like nutrient transporters, electrolyte transporters. They move sodium in certain directions, potassium in certain directions, bicarbonate, calcium. Your body is doing this electrolyte balance in the kidney as you are filtering the blood. So all the blood in your body gets kind of pressed through filters and microscopic filters in your kidneys. And that plasma then becomes the urine as it becomes purified. Your body pulls things out or puts things into it. It's an incredible process. And when you don't have enough insulin, you aren't able to hold on to that sodium primarily. And then with the sodium follows the chloride and the potassium and the magnesium and the calcium. And so it's just, I think that for some people, for a lot of people, but definitely for some people, not having an insulin spike post-meal, which is a totally healthy, normal thing, leads to massive electrolyte imbalances. And so no matter how much salt I ate, I could not hold on to it because there's not enough insulin signal level in the kidneys. And so eventually, yes, it's this cognitive dissonance. I thought at the time, this helps me, it helps so many people, but it's not totally right.
Hey everybody, Gabby here. And it's really important for me that if I'm going to share any product with you, that I use it myself. I've tried it and I actually have a relationship with it. And the other thing is I'm doing my best. I'm trying to fuel my body with clean, intentional foods. And that's why I'm excited to tell you about Lineage. Lineage is a company rooted in ancestral nutrition and radical transparency. Lineage was founded by two health forward docs, Dr. Paul Saladino and Dr. Anthony Gustin, and they're both on a mission to bring back real nutrient-dense, nose-to-tail foods. Their grass-fed beef and organ sticks and air-dried steaks are next level, slow-dried for up to 10 days to preserve nutrients, They're flavor packed and totally clean. They have no seed oils, no weird fillers, no junk, just real food the way nature and our ancestors intended. They also just launched new flavored meat sticks made from 100% grass-fed, regeneratively raised beef with a touch of heart and liver for added nutrients, but you wouldn't know. You can't taste the organs at all, believe me. It goes over big in my house. And they've spiced only with organic steam serialized herbs, no iridations, no natural flavors, that's a big one, no junk, just real food. They've got flavors like spicy Southwest and garlic and onion, and they are so delicious and perfect for keeping protein high when we're on the go, like especially in summer, maybe at work. Lineage also third-party tests all of their products, every single batch, so you know you are getting clean, real food. You will get 15% off Lineage Provisions. All you have to do is use the code Gabby. So you can head to lineageprovisions.com/Gabby Reece at lineageprovisions/Gabby Reece. And don't forget to use the code Gabby for 15% off your entire order.
So then it's just, I start to add honey in my diet, and then I add fruit.
What was the epiphany with honey? Were you thinking, oh God, like I'm in this, I painted myself in this corner. I have all these followers. I have these businesses.
Yeah.
Sort of, because this is, it's unique to your story, but these are sort of similar to what holds people into a lot of things, a job they hate, a relationship they don't want to be in, because they're like, well, it's this, I'm here. So you were there and you started saying, okay, it's good. And it's maybe good for a time or good for a specific situation, but now I'm here. So do you think I have to blow up my life to do it? Like, what's the thinking?
No, the thinking was just like, I guess I'm not at the end of this journey, right? I guess I'm not going to eat carnivore for the rest of my life, right?
Did you think that at some point?
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's why I chose the Carnivore MD handle on Instagram. It's like, I remember when I chose the Carnivore MD. What's so funny about the story, Gabby, is that the first handle that I had on Instagram was Paul Saladino MD.
Yeah. That
was my first handle. And at some point in the journey, I changed it to Carnivore MD. Yeah. And some people were like, that's cool. That's a good name,
Yeah.
And the first website I had was Paul Saladino MD.
Yeah.
And then at that point you become, kind of stuck in the, like you said.
Well, it's working.
Yeah, it's working. Or it tells people clearly what you stand for. Mm-hmm. And so, there's that moment where you think, okay, I'm not at the end of this journey. Yeah, I thought that Carnivore MD was the end of the journey, and that for my whole life, I was going to be proselytizing for meat. And I still am a huge advocate for meat.
Of course.
There's just a little more to the story now. So the honey choice was just, okay, if I'm going to add a carbohydrate back to my diet, what will it be? It could be oats. It could be wheat. It could be pasta. But from my perspective, it was, well, honey makes the most sense to me because bees make it. So even philosophically, you could maybe make an argument that like honey is an animal product. Right. So maybe you could say, maybe honey is carnivore, right? Okay. Vegans sometimes don't eat honey, so that means maybe I could eat it.
Yeah, and they won't eat figs either.
Yeah, right, because of all the wasp inside. Yeah.
It seems that the focus is, of course, there's going to be like, you're probably not going to eat a ton of grains and all of these other things, but ultimately focusing on real food and the quality versus the dogma. I'm curious from your point of view as somebody who's really been inside it. I mean, it's like if we could politicize every single thing now, it seems like we've managed to. And it's sort of like, hey, whatever you want to eat, like knock yourself out. Why would I be upset about that? Why do people get so like, you should do it the way I do it?
I think we're tribal as humans, right? And I did this. We connect our identity to things that we do in our life. I'm a surfer. I'm a guy that does jujitsu, right? I'm a vegan, right? I'm a vegetarian. It's an identity, right? I'm a carnivore.
If you've met the hottest, smartest woman on the planet before I'm not talking about your girlfriend. I don't want to get into your personal, but like, and you were Carnivore MD and you met like the most incredible woman, never mind vegetarian. She was a vegan. Could you have done it?
No, it's not happening.
Come on.
No, at a personal level,
how are you going to break bread?
How are you going to break bread? And it's just like, I don't want every interaction to be a debate.
But what if she was like, hey, no problem. And I respect you. And I know that works for you. This just feels good to me. You just be like, oh my God, you wouldn't have been able to bite your tongue.
It's hard. It's hard. And I mean, this gets into a broader conversation now, I think, about veganism at large and human nutrition. But I have some serious doubts. I respect people's sovereignty, right? Yeah. But I have some serious doubts about the ability of a vegan diet to nourish a human fundamentally. And so it just wouldn't make much sense for me to date a vegan woman, because I'm thinking the whole time I would be thinking, are you going to try and feed our kids vegan? Because there's no way that's happening, right? There's no way, like, and if you get pregnant, like, how are you going to nourish a child? So there's a lot of concern there right off the bat. If I'm dating someone seriously, I'm thinking, I want this woman that I'm dating to be healthy and to be nourished. And it would be painful for me to see a vegan woman, like, you're just not giving your body what it needs. And I guess it's hard if she says, like, I feel amazing. And
or they can say, you hear stories of like, I was good for 20 years and then somehow I fell off a cliff. There's a lot of that going on. But what if someone goes, I can't eat anything with a mother? You know what I mean? Like, it's just, you hear that and you understand that. So you think somebody basically has to have a PhD in all the other supportive herbs and spices to kind of pull it as a vegan?
Or supplements. I mean, you look at examples. I've known and talked to a lot of vegans over the years, either in debate context or just friendly context. I've had a couple of people on my podcast, a woman a number of years ago named Elise, I forget her last name, who was a very well-known vegan. She had like a big channel and then started eating meat again, felt much better. You just hear the stories. And my story was similar because I was a vegan. So I had a vegan phase probably 15 plus years ago or 16 years ago.
Was that to be healthy? What was that? What was the thinking?
Yeah. So that was when I was a physician assistant. Before I went to medical school, I was a physician assistant in cardiology. Oh. And in medical training, we don't really get nutrition training. Right. So the first sort of foray that I had into nutrition and medicine was through a vegan lens. And the very, very beginning of my learning of nutrition was, meat has these inflammatory compounds when you cook it, and you shouldn't be cooking your meat, and meat is associated with colon cancer. And like, just the first level of like the research, like if you do it's possible to support a narrative if you don't go deeper there. And so I would say raw vegan for 6 or 7 months.
How was the gas on that?
Horrible. And I lost probably 15 to 20 pounds of muscle mass. So you
were a raw vegan?
For 7 months. I wish I had more pictures. I've never been someone that takes pictures in my life.
Yeah.
But I wish I had more. These would be content gold today because I was so gaunt. I was also doing distance running. So I was so gaunt and so skinny. And like I said, I had lost a lot of muscle mass. And right now I weighed myself yesterday, 166 pounds. At this point in my life when I'm a vegan, I'm probably less than 145 pounds. Like same frame, right? So it's 20 pounds of lean muscle. I really stay pretty lean. I don't have a lot of, this is not fat loss. This is muscle mass loss, which is pretty hard to argue with, right?
Yeah.
So there was a big difference there. And as soon as I started eating meat again, the muscle mass comes back on very, very quickly. And I start to feel differently at a lot of different levels. But it was an experiment, kind of like the carnivore experiment.
I do appreciate, that's what I was saying, like thinking you really are willing to use yourself as the experiment. And because you do seem passionate and an all-in type of person, what's it like when you go, oh, I'm not at the end of the journey? Is that a hard thing for you to look at? I can use Laird as an example. I always say that Laird is the one who taught me to apologize. Laird is really good at, this was working and now it doesn't. I have to do something different. Some people do that very gracefully. I have tried to do that better as I've gotten older because it seems like the other is just a real punishing way. But to do it also kind of publicly and professionally, where do you go into yourself to go, yeah, I can take this on?
It was a hard conversation. There were a lot of conversations, both at the level of forward-facing social media and then internally for me, like, how much do I even talk about this? And it was so long ago that I don't exactly remember how the transition happened. I probably did talk to my audience at some point and say, hey, I'm eating honey.
Yeah, it wasn't like honey bullshit. Like,
yeah,
no, just kidding.
No, it was like, hey, I'm eating honey. And then I think I said I was eating fruit. When the fruit was probably a bigger thing than the honey. And I remember some tension between myself and other carnivore influencers over the honey. And it's just so petty, right? It's just people saying, oh, can't you tell that sugar is horrible for you? And Paul Saladino is eating 200 grams of honey per day. And oh my God, that's insane.
Do you lose sleep over that?
I lost a lot of sleep in the last 5.5 years through the journey, for sure. I think the first thing that I lost sleep over was just being public. I remember that sort of in the San Diego phase, right after I finished residency. I lost, and the only reason I say this is just for anyone who's thinking about doing this or in the space or in going through it. I just hope this is encouraging for them. It was, and maybe I just had to go through this, but I lost a lot of sleep over just having people respond negative to me across all of the social media outlets. And that was just not worth it. So if anyone is going through that, just stop reading the comments and just do the things that you believe in. But that was a very, very hard time for me. I was losing sleep because of heart palpitations from the ketogenic diet. So I was losing sleep because of that. I was losing sleep because of this negative feedback from the community. And I think, yes, I absolutely lost sleep thinking, how are people going to perceive me? Am I going to be seen as someone that flip-flops or waffles? But ultimately, it was just, I just had to do it. So I will say this, and this is probably not awesome, but I sort of like leaked it out gradually, right? I wasn't necessarily telling people like, hey, guess what? I had 250 grams of honey today. You're like, oh, I'm doing 75 grams of honey. And then you're like, oh, now it's 125 and maybe it's 200 some days. And so there was some concern about like, how do I actually put this information out there? But I was feeling better. And then when you do that, you start to get this positive feedback from people also that's saying like, hey, I tried that and I felt better too. Mm-hmm. And what I quickly realized was that my following didn't just abandon me and people were finding some positive benefits. And so you're like, okay, maybe it's okay to talk about this. And I was in a very dogmatic place. And I think my brain works very dogmatically and very rigidly. But what I've realized is that most people are not as rigid and dogmatic as I am.
No,
and
not.
Most people are much more open to nuance and flexibility than I am in my brain. I think that being rigid is in some ways helpful for what I do because it allows me to really dive in and be disciplined and do the experiments and understand what it's like to walk the line with intensity and really do as pure an experiment, quote unquote, as I can for myself and then talk about it or do the research to look at the pros and the cons of that. But most people are really living in a much more balanced way than my brain is thinking about the world. And they don't really care that I'm eating strawberries. They're just fine with that. But I thought it was going to be a big deal. They don't really care that I'm eating a little bit of honey. Yeah. And it's just not as big a deal to other people as it is to me. And I got positive feedback over the last few years from people whose opinions I really respect, really well. I mean, I got to be good friends with Jack Dorsey from Twitter when I was in Costa Rica, and, Jack's taken heat from political stuff, but really incredible human in person, obviously brilliant, unique human. And when I met him in Costa Rica, one of the first things he said to me was, when you changed your mind publicly, I thought that was great. And I was more interested in the content you were putting out. And I'm thinking like, wow, that's really positive to hear from me because here is a genius human who clearly did something that kind of changed the world by, creating Twitter and bringing things to life. And this guy who's way smarter than me and has done incredible things in the world actually appreciated that decision. Okay, I'm doing all right.
On the subject of fruit, what fruit do you love? And I know everyone is different, but for you, what fruit you go, hey, this is the stuff that really shows up for me?
A lot of it's kind of seasonal for me when I'm in the States. Costa Rica, we have seasons, right? So the cool thing about living in Costa Rica is I get 100% of my food from farmers markets and local butchers. I don't go to the grocery stores in Costa Rica unless it's an emergency. But so I'll go to the farmers market in Uvita, Costa Rica, where I live. And certain times of the year, you're getting rambutans and mangoes. And, I've been away for a couple months. So when I go back, it's going to be like, oh, this new thing is now in season. Certain time of the year is mangoes, or they have, what are they called? What's the other one? I'm blanking on the name. So you have mamonchinos, which is rambutans. And then you have, different types of mangoes, different times of the year. Bananas come in different times of the year. Pineapples, certain times of the year. You have mangosteen, which doesn't look like a mango at all.
No.
Certain times of the year. And then you have...
Do they have soursop or anything like that? Or their version? I don't know what they would call
guanabana.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And papaya's got to be on top of the list, right?
Papaya's there a lot of the year. Okay. So it's all interesting.
Is there timing with that? Like, when would you eat fruit? Like, are you going to eat steak and fruit?
I eat a lot of steak and fruit.
Okay.
I don't worry about putting them together.
Okay.
I don't worry about, some people I think have sensitivity, but
You're okay?
not had any problems eating them together. Yeah.
Do you usually eat the fruit? I like to eat fruit after, because then I feel like my mouth is clean and it just feels like, I don't know, there's something about it.
Yeah.
And it also, eating meat makes me eat less of everything else.
Oh, interesting.
Once especially high quality meat, like if I eat a wild game of any kind, I eat way less of it just because you get so nutrient dense. And then it makes me, I don't eat other things. I mean, less of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I just kind of eat, I might graze on some fruit during the day. I might eat fruit and meat together. I don't think about separating them. I think at that level, it gets kind of complex for people to have to think like, oh, I can only eat fruit now, or I can only eat meat now. And obviously if you feel better doing that, do that. But I don't think you have to do that all the time. But whatever's in season is what I'll go for there.
What about supplementation? Are you, it's funny. I talk to my friends, they go, all this stuff, like you see in my house, I have a couple, red light and all these things. I go, listen, if we lived the way we were meant to, we probably wouldn't need to supplement. We get it from the dirt. We'd be getting it. But the reality is we do live in a time where I just call it fortification. That's all how I'm looking at it. It's a little more of a dance, but it's like, hey, it's fortification. Is there any supplements that you, for you personally, you find that are really good to fortify you? Yeah,
I think your point is well taken. And I've wondered about this more and more. I haven't seen great studies on this, but I'd like to look. Like, people always say, oh, the soil is becoming less nutrient rich, which I think is probably true if we're cyclically farming some soils. Or
spraying. That's the other thing too, is if we're spraying, if the plains are supposedly not we're changing, we're God now, we change the weather. It's not like we had it right, somehow it was all created a certain way. No, we'll be in charge. So who knows what's getting in our soil anyway. And I'm very practical about all this stuff. Like, I can see it and be like, well, that seems like some real bullshit, but I don't freak out. But it's like, what do we need to do to fortify against this stuff? Yeah.
So I definitely supplement, and I think, it's too granular to know where every bit of my food is coming from at every moment, right? When I'm in Costa Rica, I can go to the butcher and I know that his cows are in Santa Ana, Costa Rica, and they're on this plot of grass that I've seen with my own eyes. And I can go to the farmer's market and I know the farm that this honey came from. But when I'm traveling, which is some of my life, I have no idea. If I go to Whole Foods, I'm just like, whatever, wherever the steak, grass-fed steak is coming from, that's the best I can do.
You have that ability?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't get that rigid.
Great.
No. But I think that with that in mind, like, I'm going to go to Sprouts. I'm going to buy nectarines at Sprouts that are organic, and I'm going to buy cherries at Sprouts. And I don't know where they were grown. And so I think that the soil, I'm opting for organic, and I'm trying to avoid pesticides as much as I can based on what the manufacturers are telling me. But I don't know what the quality of the soil is. I'm not growing all my own food. I'm not living on my own farm. So I think there is a real discussion around fortification. What I think about now for supplementation for me starts with creatine. I think both men and women benefit from creatine. The research is pretty clear on that. Probably young and old benefit from creatine. 5 grams a day, muscle performance, recovery. 10 grams a day has been studied for like bone density. So I have a 74-year-old mother who probably needs 10 grams of creatine per day. 20 grams of creatine per day is now being studied for mental performance and sleep deprivation. There's 2 forms. There's monohydrate and HCl. If you have issues with monohydrate, you can take HCl, but the creatine monohydrate is the most well-studied, and it's affordable, and it's very clean. Lineage makes a very clean monohydrate. But I know people who tend to feel like they retain water with the monohydrate, or they have GI issues. And in that case, you can do creatine HCl.
Right.
I just do probably about 10 grams of monohydrate every day. I do a B vitamin, a lot of B vitamins in organs, and I throw some hardened soil organs into my smoothie in the morning. We were talking about that as well. I put testicle and blood and liver from hardened soil. It's called whole package in my smoothie. But even beyond that, I have genetic polymorphisms in my folate metabolism. So this is called MTHFR. Have you heard of this? So some people call it like the motherfucker gene or whatever, right? So it's just
one of my favorite words. You don't have to whisper it.
MTHFR, I don't know. Every podcast is different.
No,
MTHFR. And it's a really important gene to know about because it affects the way that you turn dietary folate, which is usually tetrahydrofolate, into L-methylfolate. And L-methylfolate is the usable form of folate that acts as a methyl donor to homocysteine, and it becomes methionine, and like it's part of this whole folate cycle. It's very intricate, sort of biochemistry in the human body. And if you don't make enough methylfolate, a lot of things don't work well in your body. You don't get rid of homocysteine. You don't make methionine. You can't, there are over 300 methylation reactions in the human body that rely on these methyl groups. And so you need to have enough methylfolate. Folate deficiency is linked to neural tube defects in infants. And so mothers need to think about folate. But as an aside, 98% of the folate in supplements for prenatal vitamins or multivitamins is folic acid.
Right.
Now, folic acid is a form of folate that doesn't occur on the face of the earth. We've created it. And so when your body sees folic acid, it has to use an enzyme called dihydrofolate reductase to make tetrahydrofolate. And that requires the use of this enzyme. And that enzyme can become saturated, and you can end up with unmetabolized folic acid in your blood, which can potentially block folate receptors. So you can prevent your body from signaling with usable folate if you have unmetabolized folic acid. The take home here is just do not eat anything with folic acid, whether it's a sourdough bread or a prenatal vitamin. So that's just an aside. If
so you can get your blood tested and see if you have this gene?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, super
and
easy.
You're saying you have this?
I have 2 copies of this gene. So we have 2 copies of genes in our body, mom and dad, right? We are.
Oh, so you won the lottery on
yes.
it? Okay.
Yeah, I have 677, which is the point in the gene. They call it the 677 position. It's C to T, MTHFR. There's also a 1298 position. Not as bad as the 677. It just has to do with how much slower the enzyme works.
Sure.
So 677 C to T homozygous is the slowest enzyme. My MTHFR is like 15 to 20% normal, right? It's just, it's a turtle. It's really, really slow.
But you're the right guy for this stuff to happen to. No, it's true. Because then you can be like, what can I make to help me, to help other people?
Yeah.
I have talked to so many people, and they've had something that part of what their gift is because they had the thing, or they're dealing with this, and they're navigating it, and they've unlocked some things, and then they can help people. So
it's true. And the way to address that is to eat organs like liver, but I take a methylated B vitamin supplement.
Okay.
And that is riboflavin, it's B6, it's methylated B12, it's methylfolate, and it's TMG. These are easily available on Amazon. Turns your pee like fluorescent yellow, so it's really cool. I gave it to my niece and nephew because they almost certainly have the polymorphisms, and my nephew goes, "Mom, this is cool. Look at my pee. Can I take that vitamin again tomorrow?" So it's the riboflavin. The flavin moiety creates like really yellow pee. So I do creatine, I do B vitamins. I sometimes do a little bit of acerola berry just for extra vitamin C. I don't know if that's a supplement or not. I'll do the organ supplements, and then sometimes I supplement with zinc and copper because of this is our soil nutrient deficient? And I'm just in the middle of doing an experiment. I sometimes experiment. Those are the main things. So I'm going to check my zinc and copper levels and see if I need more or less. But I think a lot of people may have zinc deficiency. When you supplement with zinc, you have to do it with copper. You cannot do zinc without copper long-term, or you will likely develop a copper deficiency.
How would one take copper?
It's usually copper bisglycinate. It's just a capsule.
Okay.
And the zinc is zinc picolinate.
Yeah.
So again, you can start by just doing blood work like plasma zinc, plasma copper, and then something called ceruloplasmin, which is connected with copper. And then just get a sense of like where your levels are. You don't want to take copper without zinc. You don't want to take zinc without copper. The ratio is usually 15:1. So you take 30 milligrams of zinc for 2 milligrams of copper, and it should be good. And I don't think everyone needs that, but increasingly I hear about guys with low testosterone who start supplementing with zinc, and it can improve that. I had a guy message me the other day. He said, "I'm 24 and I have low testosterone." I'm thinking, you're 24?
Yeah.
And you have low, and I think, okay, so guys, if you have low testosterone, how are you sleeping, right? Are you taking care of your sleep? You must sleep to have your testicles and penis work. You must have sleep to have testosterone. You have to sleep. You must have nutrients. You probably really need to eat meat to have optimal testosterone. And if you are doing those 2 things, if you are sleeping and eating meat and not like restricting calories, then you should check your zinc and copper levels. And maybe you have low zinc or copper.
Yeah. You mentioned sleep, which makes me think about something that I know has really become important to you, which is light and sleep. You know, I used to say that if you asked me 7-8 months ago on the hierarchy of things, I would have said, sleep and nutrition right? Like could really help you, and then movement and community. But actually I've now switched and said probably looking at the sun would be number one. Because it's almost like you could do everything perfect, but if you're not doing some of this basic stuff, letting your eyeballs see sunlight, you're missing the boat. Not to mention, and I'd love to hear, what you're feeling and thinking about it, the blue light from our phone and all the lights, because I sort of feel like this has become something that's become really important to you.
So you think about sunlight. You guys gave me this great gift and let me do a pool workout with you today, and we're outdoors, right? So we're outdoors at your pool, and you think about what is that light like, right? It's light from the sun. It's a little cloudy, but it's light from the sun. So we have a non-flickering light, right? It's a steady light. The sun doesn't flicker. It is ultraviolet, UVA, UVB. It is full spectrum visible, and that is not enriched in blue. So you have a full spectrum of visible light, not enriched in blue, and you have infrared. So those are all of the components that you need to make a whole food light. That's actual real unprocessed light. In contrast, you have indoor lighting, which can be better or worse, but it is essentially processed light. So what you've done with indoor lighting, and most of our indoor lighting today is LEDs, that stands for light emitting diodes. You've taken out the UV. You've also taken out the infrared, right? So you've processed out the far ends of the spectrum, and the visible light is enriched in blue. So there's a real parallel here between, you have steak is unprocessed light, and then you have really processed deli meat, right? So these are completely different foods. So highly processed bologna versus a steak. That's the difference between indoor lighting and outdoor lighting. The other thing about the indoor lighting is it's flickering because it's a light emitting diode. So let's talk about the wavelengths of light, and then I'll talk about the flicker. So when we are outside, some people fear the ultraviolet, but I don't think we need to, as the mainstream has been telling us. I think that you should not go outside and get burned, but the infrared component of outdoor light almost certainly protects us somewhat from the UV. So the body uses infrared light, which is just a different wavelength from ultraviolet, to make melatonin in all of the cells of the body. When we think about melatonin, we mostly think about melatonin being made in the brain through the eyes. This is the suprachiasmatic nucleus. This is our circadian rhythm. But every cell in your body makes melatonin in the mitochondria and uses it as an antioxidant. So if you are not outside for some significant point of the day, portion of the day, you are probably melatonin deficient systemically in your body. Now, we've found ways to fortify with a red light, right? If you are not outside, if your job requires you, you can sit in front of a red light panel, which will have visible red and infrared. These are two wavelengths, right? So you can start to supplement. We're smart enough. I can supplement infrared. It would be better to be outdoors, but you can supplement infrared if you are deficient. But infrared is essential for human health. We're never told this.
Yeah.
Instead, we're only told to fear the UV. When it comes to ultraviolet, I think it's all about context. And a big piece of this is, what is the health of our skin at baseline? And how does that affect how our skin reacts to ultraviolet light? So there have been studies in animals, and they're very clear that when you feed an animal a diet that's higher in polyunsaturated fats, which are fragile fats, they have more susceptibility to sun damage, especially within the ultraviolet spectrum. So what we know is that what we eat ends up in our skin. And when we eat polyunsaturated fats, especially linoleic acid, which is this fat in seed oils, we are going to have more linoleic acid in our fat depot, all of the adipose deposits, all the fat on our body, in our every cell membrane of our cells, our mitochondria, and certainly every cell within our skin, right? Within the different layers of our skin, the dermis and the epidermis. And in humans, there are studies where dermatologists will do something called tape stripping, where they take a piece of tape and they pull off the stratum corneum, and they can use that as an in vivo model. And when you expose the stratum corneum of skin taping in one of these dermatologic experiments to linoleic acid, it causes inflammatory markers to increase and more oxidative damage to the DNA. This is what we're doing if we're putting on a sunscreen or an oil on our skin that is full of linoleic acid. So linoleic acid, it's not toxic for us per se. There's a little bit of linoleic acid in the fat of a steak. There's a little bit of linoleic acid in an almond, which is fine, but not in the doses that we're getting today. These are not necessarily ancestrally consistent.
Yeah.
So the concern here is most humans today now consume 10 to 20% of their diet as linoleic acid calories. Historically, 0.5 to 1.5%. All these hunter-gatherer groups, we're talking 10 to 30x increases in this fragile polyunsaturated fat. So the hypothesis, or at least the question to ask is that a problem? Does that make our skin more susceptible to sun damage? I would suggest it likely does. Yeah. That's the null hypothesis. And then what do we do when we go out in the sun? We put on sunscreen. And multiple compounds in traditional sunscreens have now been linked to cancers. We know they get absorbed through the skin. They're excreted in our poop and our pee. So they are going through all of your body. And yes, they work at the level of your skin to protect you, quote unquote, from ultraviolet rays. They do their job because they have aromatic structures. They will prevent ultraviolet rays from contacting your skin. At what cost, right? And then if you look at, there's some pretty incredible meta-analyses that I don't think mainstream dermatologists want to talk about. I would love to talk to someone about this. I mean, there's large meta-analyses of 300 plus studies looking at sunscreen. It's not really clear that sunscreen decreases skin cancer.
Oh, listen, I have a doctor. I've been with him since 1994. His name is Dr. Harold Lancer. He really came through burn victims. Very smart guy, very fancy. I go there, I start sweating because he's in Beverly Hills. He's high end. And he said to me, there's actually no real link from sunburn and melanoma. Melanoma is genetic. Now, the caveat might be, and if you're a red-haired person and you're hearing this, you're snapping, right? Is that you can have irregular cell, basal cell things occur from sunburn. This is true. But to the point of melanoma, it's genetic.
Melanoma is different. So there's 3 types of skin cancer. Yes. I totally agree. There's squamous, basal, and melanoma. We fear melanoma the most.
Right.
It's the most aggressive. It's a cancer of the melanin-producing cells of the skin. If you look at the data, outdoor workers who get chronic, moderate sun exposure are protected.
Well, what do they call it? A solar callus?
Yes, a solar callus. You're protected. Bob Marley died of melanoma. I believe it was on the bottom of his foot. And we know that vitamin D deficiency increases your rate of all cancers, solid organ cancers specifically, right? So it's all connected. It all makes sense sort of historically and evolutionarily. We've just kind of gotten the story backwards and now we're sun fearing. So
Which is weird.
It's very weird. So we'll go back to the light differentiation. We talked about the skin cancers a little bit. I think your diet affects the resiliency of your skin to the sunlight in the first place. Don't go outside and get burned. Understand there's a context. If you're from a Mediterranean, closer to the equator place, you have more melanin, you're more protected. If you're from Ireland or Norway or somewhere, you're a very efficient sun harvester and you're going to have to be a little more careful, right? Yeah. It's going to take you longer to develop a solar callus.
Go early and go late.
Yeah. But I when I first moved to Costa Rica, I lived with a guy from Britain and he's pretty white, but man, within a few months, he was dark. So even a guy that's from Britain can develop a very serious tan and solar callus. It just takes your body more time, and he was more likely to get burned in the beginning. So he's in the morning and night developing the adjustments of your skin. And then you contrast that with indoor light, right? So we talked about the indoor wavelengths. You don't have any UV, you don't have any infrared. You're infrared deficient. The visible wavelengths indoors, especially from LEDs, are blue enriched. And blue light is valuable for us in the morning. It helps wake us up. Blue light is not bad for us. It's just, what is the dose relative to the other wavelengths? There's so many parallels between food here and other things. It's like linoleic acid is not harmful per se, but it's probably potentially harmful when it's 20 times what we were ever getting historically. Same thing with blue light. Blue light, beneficial for you outside, helps wake you up, entrains your circadian rhythm. If there's way more blue light than you're used to getting historically as a human and the other visible wavelengths aren't there, it's potentially problematic at the level of the macula, in the back of the eye, so many ways that it could potentially be damaging for us. And then the thing about the indoor lighting is that it's flickering. And this hasn't been talked about enough.
That's the thing, those light bulbs, like we don't even realize.
They flicker.
They're flickering.
The LEDs flicker. So this is something called pulse width modulation. When an LED light turns off, it goes completely off, right? So it's on, off, on, off, on, off. It's like, I don't know if you have brothers or sisters and they come in your room and you just like flick the light on and off. It's really disorganizing for your central nervous system. It's really unpleasant to have lights going on and off. And so LEDs flicker at different frequencies. The phone is one of the worst ones.
I believe I heard you say it's worse than your laptop.
Yes. The MacBook flickers faster, so our eyes perceive it as a more steady light. Oh. The phones flicker more slowly. This is the pulse width modulation. So the phones are worse at night for us because of the flickering. You can turn your phone to like a completely orange screen. You can take the blue light off, but it's still flickering. And it's still sort of like doing this kind of like poke to your nervous system. So if you have to be looking at something at night, use your MacBook. And I don't know anything about the screen displays of IBMs or Androids or anything like that. I just know the Apples. It's just what I use. So that's what I've heard about. So like indoor lighting. Now the solution for indoor lighting is incandescent bulbs because these are fascinating. These are the Edison bulbs. There's a tungsten filament between two of these conductive points in the bulb, and the tungsten filament heats up to like 4,000 degrees Fahrenheit. It's fire in a bottle. And that's what emits the light, right? So the other thing I should mention is firelight. When you're sitting around a fire, it doesn't flicker. It's doing the flickering of the fire, but it's not flickering the way an LED bulb does. And the wavelengths are actually pretty similar to what you're getting outdoors from a fire. The same with a candle. We light candles. They can start fires in the home and they probably pollute the indoor air, but the candlelight and the firelight and the incandescent bulb are pretty similar because the tungsten filament is basically on fire, quote unquote, in a tungsten bulb. And though an outlet in your wall is an alternating current, and the alternating current is alternating at like 120 hertz, you don't see it in a bulb, in an incandescent bulb, because they have thermal inertia. You can't cool a tungsten filament down to zero so it stops emitting light in a fraction of a second like that. You know, if you run a current through a wire and it gets red hot, it takes time to cool down. It's still emitting light. And so it's flickering 100. It's like, you know, the pulse wave of the electricity from the wall is going 120 hertz, but the tungsten filament doesn't cool down to zero. So it's essentially non-flickering light from an incandescent bulb. So the problem is, of course, going back to what we were talking about earlier, that we've been told we need to be energy conservers, right?
Yeah.
And so you need to change all the bulbs in your house to LEDs. That's going to decrease your power bill, but worsen your health because your incandescent bulbs actually do give us some infrared light and they're better for our eyes. They're better for our circadian rhythm. So, and you know this, I mean, I go into restaurants a lot now and I think this is a nice restaurant. Why are you guys so dumb with your lighting?
Yeah.
Why are like every restaurant that's smart is going to use an incandescent bulb. No one likes sitting under LED lights.
No, they don't.
It's such a horrible experience. Even if you have an LED light that's like warm and orange, it's still flickering and we still feel it.
We know. I find it fascinating, the mechanism of we're all being responsible, but people don't really know what that it's hammering us.
We've lost sight, right?
We could tell if we tell the men that if they get the right light bulbs, their testosterone will go up. And we tell the women that their skin will have less fine lines, we'll get there.
That's what we need. I just need the magic words for both.
That's it.
Yeah.
Cellulite, stuff like that.
The incandescent bulbs will decrease your cellulite.
Yes, see, perfect. They're on.
There's a clip. We've touched on this a little bit previously, but I mean, if you want good skin, like you've got to eat protein, right?
Yeah.
Collagen is all the rage today. And I think it's because we generally don't eat enough protein. Yeah. And I think that, yes, take collagen supplements, but eat enough protein. Where do you think you get the proteins to make the skin in your face and your arms and, everywhere? You get that from meat, like to make collagen, you use amino acids that are found in meat. Guess what? Our steak has collagen in it. In fact, a lot of collagen.
And usually a lot of times the process, because we even looked at it for our business, making collagen supplementation to do it well is very tricky.
It's very hard
because can be a little gross how they, it's hard to do. Let's just say that
it's a hard one to do.
Yeah.
It's a hard one to do. And I think that one of the reasons that collagen supplements are so popular with women, and I don't think this is terribly controversial, is because they don't eat enough meat. And so, like if a woman like,
she's like, I look good.
Well, yeah, you're going to look better with collagen. You could also just eat more meat, or do both, and you're going to look even better.
Yeah.
But I think that like the collagen market is especially strong with women because, I mean, I see how women eat. Like I have a girlfriend, I've dated women in the past. Women just, I think that the narrative is different for men and women. It's so interesting, right? Men grow up. We hear about creatine when we're teenagers. Every man I know has heard the word creatine. very few women I know even have heard the word, what is creatine? It's just not part of a female's upbringing.
It's big time that way. I mean, I heard about creatine in the 90s because I worked out at Gold's Gym, the Mecca.
Well, you were also a professional athlete, right?
And so I heard it and I was like, oh, that's interesting. I'd take it for a while. And I think it's, I'm just fascinated by what mobilizes us, right?
Yeah.
Like most of us, it's like, do you have to wait to have something wrong to get something? And my whole thing is, I know it's hard to invest in something that you don't see the immediate return, but I am curious because you have had your own health ups and downs, but at your core, I wonder, what is your big why for all of this?
I hinted at it earlier. I think that growing up with a father who was unhealthy and a mother who had thyroid disease and joint issues, and then being interested in medicine because my family was in medicine, and then just feeling like from the minute I started studying medicine, there's something missing. And people are not being told the whole truth, or at least they're just not being given the whole story. And I think that the reason I do this is because I feel compelled now to put ideas into the world that will help people. And they're so simple. And it's like, wait, people need to hear this. You need to know. That's the thing I get most excited about, is that I have met now hundreds, if not thousands of people who have literally reversed the conditions that Western medicine told them were incurable. Right. And that's just like, wow, how could I not talk about this? And look, I think the solution is different for every human. I don't think there's a one size fits all prescription, but I know that there are some easy, simple ideas that benefit a lot of people. So like skin conditions, autoimmune conditions. I mean, I've seen so many people reverse these conditions. And again, not a panacea, not a one size fits all, but that's something that I feel compelled to talk about. And it just comes down to food quality, simplicity of what you're eating. For some reason, it feels like there are forces actively working against confusing that message, and whether these are agribusiness, industrial food processing companies fueling something, like it's such a simple message. Just eat real food, eat single ingredient foods, eat meat, eat plants, eat foods with a label that your grandmother would recognize every ingredient. And I think most chronic illness would get better, would reverse. I think that I get fueled more when I dig in and I see research and I see historical fact that like over the last even 20 years, large processed food companies are actively funding organizations that are almost obviously built to confuse people.
Getting ready to wrap this up. I have very high cholesterol, super high, like crazy. I always had 292, 294.
Total or LDL?
Total. And I've always had it because first time I got my blood work done, I was in my 20s. So that's how I knew. And then it's been conversation. I was a foot striking athlete. There's some maybe suggestions about when you strike your feet on the ground, especially barefoot. My father is from the Caribbean, half black, half white. Like they say, it could be a genetic component. That's why I told you I'm most anemic. But going deeper into cholesterol, talk about ideas that we can't get people off of. I think I was reading something about in certain groups that live to 100, a high amount of them, right? Like 85% or something have very high cholesterol. So can we talk about cholesterol? Because this one blows my mind that we're still talking about, cholesterol. Our brain's basically almost made of cholesterol. Oh, I know. Let's take an we can get into that, but maybe we can just sort of visit the cholesterol neighborhood because this impacts a lot of people. You can be 40 and they'll try to start,
Oh, you can be 20.
Putting you.
And start trying. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny because I'm writing another book. So I wrote the Carnivore Code in 2020. It's about the carnivore diet. We talked about how right as I was publishing that, I had a little bit of a,
You're like, oh shit.
Yeah. And so I wanted to write another book, just kind of updated ideas about food quality and more nuance. And I just kind of wrote the chapter on cholesterol, and it ended up being 28 pages single spaced. So I'll try and distill it here. But when you think about cholesterol, you're talking about LDL cholesterol, generally speaking, low density lipoprotein. So let's just start off with this is something that humans have always had. It's an essential part of our physiology. Now, LDL cholesterol is a membrane-bound lipoprotein, basically balloon that travels around your bloodstream and delivers triglycerides, which are fat, and cholesterol to your cells. So it's a bus that leaves the liver and goes to your cells peripherally and then kind of goes back to the liver. It runs a bus route, right? And without that membrane-bound lipoprotein particle, humans are essentially dead. You cannot live without LDL. You really cannot live without the contents of the LDL, which are cholesterol and triglycerides. Colloquially, we call these things cholesterol, but they're really lipoproteins. And the way that we check them in humans is we sort of isolate the cholesterol fraction. And so we call it your blood cholesterol. But that cholesterol, which is a steroid molecule and a precursor for all of the steroid hormones in your body, progesterone, estrogen, cortisol, aldosterone, testosterone, DHEA, androstenedione, like all of the steroid hormones that allow you to manage salt in your body, that allow you to respond to stress, that have to do with your awakening response, cortisol, that allow men to be men and women to be women, that allow fertility and pregnancy. Like these are all derived from cholesterol, right? Which your liver makes in large amounts every day because it's essential for human life. But just broadly, somehow within the last 100 years or 70 years, we've been told, like, oh, it's also killing you, right? So LDL, low density lipoprotein, also participates in the immune response. So it's not only just a vessel that carries nutrients, triglycerides and cholesterol from the liver to the cells, it participates in the immune response. And what we know is that if you have higher levels of cholesterol, you are generally more resilient in the face of infections. So sepsis, bacterial infection, higher cholesterol, protective, right? Higher LDL, protective. And there's been studies in animals where they take out LDL cholesterol and they're more susceptible to bacterial infection. They've done the converse. They give them extra LDL cholesterol, they're more resistant to bacterial infections. And so, as you mentioned, in a lot of the longevity studies, the people who live to be centenarians or the people that live to old age, they tend to have higher than normal levels of cholesterol levels that most doctors would say, you need a statin for this, which is just, it's absurd when you realize you're talking to a 95-year-old human that's incredibly healthy and outperforming their cohort. The whole conversation is just kind of fraught. Now, the reason it's complicated is because if you look at the data, right? Well, we have to back up one step, right? So we sort of touched on this earlier, but if you look at our population as a whole in the West, we're pretty sick.
Yeah,
right?
Of course. What are we, 80? How many of us are metabolically dysfunctional?
86,
is it 93%?
86 to 93%,
right.
depending on the study.
Crazy.
So 86 to 93% of people in the United States, Western cohorts, have at least one marker of metabolic syndrome, right? So metabolic syndrome is basically this precursor to diabetes. It's synonymous with insulin resistance, and 86 to 93% of people have at least one. So they're on the spectrum. You are at some level, you're on the way to diabetes town, right? And that's not a good thing. So you have some level of metabolic dysfunction, some level of AKA synonymous with insulin resistance. So we're looking at a very dirty pond, right? So the milieu. So when you look at that, when you sample that very dirty pond, there is a consistent relationship in something called like Mendelian randomization studies between LDL levels and the incidence of cardiovascular disease. So Mendelian randomization is where they look at different genetic polymorphisms or mutations that cause high and low cholesterol, and they correlate those with the incidence of cardiovascular disease. They graph it onto a linear axis. And you can see that the lipid hypothesis, as promulgated as sort of talked about by most lipidologists and cardiologists and doctors today, says, like, look, this is a clear line, right? And the lower your cholesterol, the less cardiovascular disease, the higher your cholesterol, the more cardiovascular disease. Therefore, LDL is, quote, causal in atherosclerosis. I think there's a problem here. So if you look at it a little more closely, some things start to come out of this. The high end, the people on the highest end of the LDL to cardiovascular disease relationship are, and remember, this is genetic. So it's a genetic Mendelian randomization. It's people with familial hypercholesterolemia. It's called FH. And though Western medicine treats FH as a manifestation, there are a lot of genetic polymorphisms that can cause FH. There's over 2,000 genetic sort of changes that can cause you to have high cholesterol. And in many people with familial hypercholesterolemia, those genetic changes also change things at an immune level. So in order for LDL cholesterol to become a part of an atherosclerotic plaque in the arterial wall, it has to become stuck to this proteoglycan matrix within the arterial wall, and then it has to be engulfed by a macrophage. And when in people who have FH, the macrophages are more likely to engulf the LDL. So is it the LDL or is it the fact that with the same genetics, you have a macrophage, an immune cell that's more likely to sort of gobble it up, right? It's like a little Pac-Man thing. So that's kind of a confounding factor. So when you look at the high end of this graph, you think FH is not, these changes in LDL at the high end do not necessarily, they're not in isolation, right? It has other changes with regard to the immune system that affect how atherosclerotic plaques develop. So is that really the LDL, or is it potentially the macrophages at the actual level of the plaque formation? On the low end, you have PCSK9 polymorphisms, but what we see in PCSK9, if you look at the literature with PCSK9 is a molecule that tells the LDL receptor when to pull out of the liver membrane. So a lot of the level of LDL in your body, in your blood, has to do with how much of the LDL gets pulled out of your blood by receptors on the liver. And so in some people, there are higher levels of LDL receptors, and that means they pull more LDL out of the blood. And that has to do with their PCSK9 genotype. And in some people, they have lower levels of LDL. And when PCSK9 is causing LDL to be low, you can look at that, and those people actually tend to develop higher rates of Alzheimer's dementia. So it's like, okay, on the low end, you're looking at a genetic polymorphism that isn't necessarily benign in the first place. Yeah. And on the high end, you're looking at a genetic polymorphism of people who also have changes to the immune system. So is this graph really what we should be basing this on? And then really the caveat here, the bow that we tie on this is, okay, let's actually look at the relationship between LDL cholesterol and cardiovascular disease in a population in which we have done any metric that approximates insulin sensitivity, right? Because these studies don't think about that at all.
You're talking about clean water. Do it in a clean pond.
If you did it in a clean pond, what do you see if you do this in a clean pond? So there are some studies that look at HDL levels, and it's not a perfect proxy, but HDL tends to give you some indication of metabolic health or lack of it. Insulin levels, all these things. There are other ratios of your lipids, like your triglyceride to HDL ratio is a really good indicator of underlying metabolic health. So any study that actually looks at people who are metabolically healthy or healthier, you see a very different relationship between LDL and cardiovascular disease. Instead of going like this, the line kind of goes like this. It's almost flat. It's like the slope of the line changes completely. So there's still, even if you take a population, like for instance, I'm thinking of the Framingham study. If you look at Framingham and you look at the relationship between LDL levels and cardiovascular disease incidence, and you stratify that by HDL, right? So you take one line, and just if you look at the overall Framingham cohort, LDL versus cardiovascular disease. So LDL on the y-axis, cardiovascular disease on the x-axis, you'll see a line that looks like this. If you stratify it by HDL, you'll split it into 4 lines, and it kind of looks like this, right? So you get, okay, the lowest HDL is up here. So the people who are probably the least insulin sensitive, it looks like this. There's a pretty clear straight relationship, and it's pretty high slope, right? The more LDL. A little bit low, you have more HDL. Okay, it looks like this. More HDL looks like this. The highest level of HDL looks like this. So what's going on there, right? It's like, okay, clearly insulin sensitivity matters a lot. It's not this, it's this.
Yeah.
So this is what's never talked about by physicians when you go to get your blood work done. They look at your cholesterol and they say, Gabby, your LDL cholesterol is 190.
Yeah.
You know, okay, tell me more. Like, do they ever ask you what your fasting insulin is? Do they look at your triglyceride to HDL ratio? Do they ask you about a fasting glucose, a hemoglobin A1C? Have they asked you to wear a continuous glucose monitor? Have they done any further metric that actually looks at your underlying metabolic health to give you a better sense of your cardiovascular disease risk? Because are you this line or are you this line?
Right.
Right?
So
and
different.
That's the difference.
Yeah.
That's the difference. And so to me, when I look at that, I think LDL is not causal, right? Because this line and this line should be exactly the same if LDL causes atherosclerosis.
Right.
LDL is involved in atherosclerosis. And if you happen to be on this line, if you are in a dirty pond, if something else starts the fire and you give it more wood, it's going to burn hotter.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's good evidence, and I think there's evidence to the contrary. I don't think LDL starts the fire. I don't think LDL is the driving factor. And the reason this is important is because what happens? Here's a statin, here's a statin, here's a statin. We're only treating LDL. We're not treating insulin sensitivity.
And what about our brain like 25 years after taking statin?
Well, that's a real problem. That's a real problem.
Because you're taking this thing to lower your cholesterol, and then all of a sudden you're like, what was my name?
Well, and different statins have different water versus fat solubility. So the brain makes its own cholesterol. And statins that cross the blood-brain barrier are possibly much worse for your brain long-term than statins that don't cross the blood-brain barrier. But some statins don't cross the blood-brain barrier, or they're hydrophilic versus hydrophobic statins. But yes, so the problem I think here is what we see is, okay, I think we're treating the wrong thing.
Yeah.
We should be treating insulin resistance. We should be treating metabolic dysfunction. And then the question becomes, okay, how do we treat that?
Yeah.
Well, the problem for Western medicine is we don't have a drug to treat that, which is actually not a problem in the first place because drugs don't correct the root cause ever.
Yeah.
But we need to be actually asking the question, but Western medicine doesn't do that.
I'd be remiss. I have to ask, and people ask me to ask you. So when you get into a working situation with somebody that is not what they seem, and the whole thing, by the way, I was fascinated by I never really paid attention to the Liver King at all because I just see it. And the minute my eyes see stuff that I'm like, oh yeah, that's not adding up. I move, my brain moves.
Right.
Cause I'm trying to get into a place in my life where I don't go like, that's good, that's bad, that's right, that's wrong. I'm just trying to keep moving.
Right.
And be like, oh, not for me. And just move, right? It saves energy. But and actually, I did watch Laird and I watched the documentary, and I kind of appreciate the doubling and tripling down, or maybe a deep wound that couldn't get healed, or whatever the million things are, because you can see it clear as day there. But for you, is it one of those situations where you're like, oh, okay, we got to change a strategy because it's so interesting where I don't know how anyone kind of bought into it in the first place, but I'm just curious that along the way, people don't realize you've had to kind of be like, hey guys, and move and kind of get around things. How was that situation for you? Because people are fascinated by that, by the way.
Well, people, like, it's human experience, and it's raw, real human experience on display. I think you're seeing what we're seeing with Liver King is someone going through therapy very publicly. Yeah. He's doing public therapy now.
That's a good point.
And I think we all have those parts of ourselves that mirror something. Everyone,
Totally.
all of us know that we're not perfect, right?
Oh yeah.
And so God. When someone, and I think he is going through public therapy, not by choice, but by
by outing.
Yeah, by outing. But he's actually choosing to go through public therapy now. And so we're all sort of seeing a little bit of ourselves in that.
Yeah.
We've all done things like
of course.
Yeah, we've all done questionable things.
The plank in your eye,
Yeah. This the biblical, why would you, don't remove the splinter in someone else's eye when you can't see the plank in your own eye. But, let him be the first to cast the stone who is without sin.
Of course.
And I'm not particularly religious anymore. I grew up Catholic, but so his name is Brian Johnson, ironically.
Yeah. Isn't that so funny?
It's so ironic.
And you're going to go see the other
Brian Johnson tomorrow.
Yeah. I asked him about what if his girlfriend wanted to have sex past his bedtime, and he didn't even barely answer me. Because he's on a schedule.
I know.
This is, for those of you listening, it's Brian Johnson who's Don't Die. And I was so fascinated by, he goes to bed at 8:30, and I was like, what if she's like, yeah, at 8:15? And he just kind of glazed over. I was like, oh, okay, that didn't land.
Yeah.
But so I think you're right. It's Brian Johnson.
So this is Brian Johnson.
He's a sensitive person, not the Don't Die guy.
Yeah, this is Liver King Brian Johnson, spelled differently.
Yes.
He is a sensitive person. I was friends with him before the Liver King thing. Mm-hmm. And my impression when I first became friends with him was like, this is a good dude. This is a good human. We had a lot of things in common. We both like to walk barefoot on the ground. We both like food that's high quality. We both like to eat meat. We both like to work out hard. We both like to be in the sun. We both like to be in nature. It's like, okay, this is a wild human, Mm-hmm. And I think that like it is when you're dating someone or anything, you don't see all the sides of someone until things get hard. And so he and I became friends, and I started my social media before he did. And then at some point, I remember I was out on a boat with him, and we were just hanging out as friends, wake surfing. And he goes, I'm going to start my own social media. And I thought, okay, good luck. I hope it's cool. It's been really hard for me to grow. And so I got to lead it on Instagram in November of 2020 during COVID, because I was speaking out against COVID. Uh-huh. And then I restarted my Instagram, and he restarted at the exact same time. And so, I started to grow again, and he went like this, he just got, and I was looking at it going, wow, people are really fascinated by this guy. He's had incredible growth. And at that point, we became more distant, and he kind of started to change. And it was very strange. I was like, who is this guy now? And from my perspective, I began to have doubts as his friend, what are you doing? And then in the beginning, he didn't talk about steroids, right? He was just like, I'm doing these crazy things and I'm ancestral. And I was like, I don't need
I just think you follow the vein on the bicep. That tells you
Yeah,
everything.
yeah.
But I think for me, I guess when I look at this, I guess maybe the bigger question for me I find fascinating, because I have actually quite a few acquaintances that have gotten later in life attention, right? Like when I was 18, I played volleyball in college, and then I started working in fashion, and then it was like slow. It's like a little bit. Okay, you're 20, you're 22, you can sort of see the game, and then you realize like it's sort of bullshit. And then it's been interesting now you have a whole group of people that are coming into social media, and they're getting, let's put it in quotes, famous later. And it is fascinating to watch the reaction. And I'm just curious for you, as somebody who maybe this wasn't the plotted, chartered, route, and all of a sudden you find yourself getting attention, good and bad. Have you gotten a handle on it? How is that for you?
With the Liver King stuff? Or in general?
No, just in general. Because for me, he's just actually a cautionary tale of that.
Yeah.
And it's a person who, there's a lot of people who should not have public jobs. They are too sensitive. He is a sensitive guy who has some stuff that he should, visit. There's a certain, a lot of artists, you see them where you go, this is a wildly talented person. And you're like, but also shouldn't be sensitive because maybe it's too much, it's too out there. But how has that been? I am fascinated to see people who didn't realize they were going to be in the public.
Right.
And now you're in the public. How is that?
I think he was very much more in the public than I ever have been. I mean, he used to tell me that he would go to UFC events and the whole arena's chanting, Liver King, Liver King. Like I will never probably ever walk into a UFC event and people are like, Paul Saladino, it's too many syllables in the first place. And nobody, but like he had this meteoric fame.
Yes.
And I think like you said, I can see it now. He had this like real wound, And it seems
to be a dad wound.
It really changed him in an unfortunate way. And then he kind of lied to everyone and misled everyone. He misled me,
Yeah.
And I don't think that it's like, and like I said, I think we're all coming from this place of like knowing that none of us is perfect. And he's doing public therapy. So we're all kind of fascinated, but at the same time, kind of like, wow, what a weird dude that he made these decisions.
Okay. Last question. What's like your favorite way to train? I mean, you're very fit. You look great. You're lean. You're strong. What's your thing that you love?
Other than surfing?
Yeah, I love that you have this push-pull with surfing, it feels like.
I mean, surfing is my favorite thing. That's why I moved to Costa Rica in the first place. And most of the time that I've been in Costa Rica, I only surf.
Really?
I don't train other than surfing.
You look like you lift heavy items.
I do not lift any heavy items that much.
You look good.
Yeah, and I don't take hormonal supplementation. I think it's genetics and diet.
How do you feel about those, the hormone?
I think that for both men and women, if there's a need for it, it's fine. But I think that we have to make sure as physicians that we're really trying to uncover all the potential root causes. And I think for so many people, they get put on the hormones far too quickly.
Yeah.
And they're not looking at zinc levels and copper levels and sleep and diet quality and all these things. So, but I mean, my favorite way to train is actually martial arts. I really like striking. So I travel everywhere with boxing gloves and I want to get a little more into wrestling. I don't do so much jujitsu anymore because I like my joints the way they are, but I just find like movement interesting to me. So I'm happy if I have a punching bag and a pull-up bar. Although what we did in the pool was awesome today, and I'm going to do much more of that in my pool in Costa Rica, but I want a punching bag and a pull-up bar. Those are the two things in my home gym that I use more than anything. I love hanging. I like the way it decompresses the spine. I do pull-ups and I like that for upper body. And then I just like to hit the punching bag and I like to kick the punching bag. And those are my favorite things. Like those are my favorite ways to train. And if I'm with friends and I want to learn like, okay, I'll work on Nordics. I like body weight. I like mobility stuff. I don't like lifting heavy weights terribly much. I don't lift heavy weights a lot. I don't do bench press. I don't do squats. I don't do any of this stuff. I like to sprint, but mostly I surf, I do pull-ups and I hit the punching bag.
Great.
That's it.
Paul Saladino, please remind people all the places.
Okay.
And if they want to try your products, just lead them. We'll have it obviously in the show notes.
Thank you so much. Yeah. So it's super easy. It's not Carnivore MD anymore, right? We come full circle. It's Paul Saladino.
You're growing up, Paul.
Going back. Paul Saladino MD on all the socials. We talked about it earlier in the podcast. It started out as Paul Saladino MD, went to Carnivore MD. Now it's Paul Saladino MD now again. And then lineageprovisions.com for meat sticks, jerky, protein, creatine, tallow, glyphosate-free honey, and then heartandsoil.com luca.co for desiccated organs. I'm going to get you some of the her package, which has the ovary and the fallopian tubes and the uterus. And Luca and I love the whole package, which is the testicles, the liver, and the blood. I asked Laird if he's eaten testicles. He said, "Oh yeah,
you should try Laird's pate. It's insane."
I want to eat it.
Oh, you have to. Is there anything else? Is there any invitation? Because there are so many people who don't feel well, and maybe they feel overwhelmed because we have so much data. Is there any simple invitation that you'd want to leave people with before we go to remind them or to start them off?
Yeah, I think that your body wants to be healthy, right? Like your homeostatic state, your resting state, your intrinsic birthright is health, right? So you don't have to work super hard to get there. You have to just do what your body is expecting as a species, Homo sapien, right? And you have to remove the things that are in the way. Allopathic medicine is the medicine that I did in medical school. It's an MD, a traditional medicine. I've always been fascinated by this very simple tenet of naturopathic medicine. The body heals itself when you remove the impediments. And so I think that's very true. So I just think that people who are listening to this, if they're like, your body wants to be healthy if you just do the simple things and remove the things that are in the way. And that's just like, oh, okay, like I don't have to do as much as I thought. Just eat the simple foods and stop eating the junk foods and go outside sometimes and spend time with people you care about and do something that you enjoy. And your body will return to that, like your steady state, your baseline is health. Health is not like some top of the mountain. Yeah. Health is the bottom of the mountain, like the problem is that you're just in the wrong state, but like health is the bottom of the mountain. And then once you get to the bottom of the mountain and you get there, you can start walking up the mountain if you want to get better and better, but you don't have to like climb a mountain to get to health. You really just have to like give your body what it's expecting and remove the things that are in the way. It's much simpler than people think. Yeah. And that level of health, I think, is probably more profound than people expect. We're capable of a lot more. And most of the things like we talked about that are decreasing people's quality of life are reversible.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the best part.
That's a really cool part. And you don't have to take medications for your whole life, probably.
Yeah.
Sometimes they have a role, but a lot of times you don't need them for your whole life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Paul Saladino, thank you. And
thanks so much for spending time with me.
And thanks for pool training. And
thank you for pool training. It was amazing.
Thanks, everyone.